Today, we're talking about velvet. We're talking about car coats. And we're talking about the Burda menswear 6932. This coat pattern also comes as a jacket. But initially when I looked at it, this jacket was too short. And I'm guessing in the way that it was styled, it's meant to look a little bit contemporary, which doesn't really fit what I'm thinking for this. Now, I've already made this coat, so I'm now filming to let you know the mistakes and the hiccups that I hit along the way. I will say that this project was extremely fun, and just like the Gucci sweater knockoff, which I'll link below, I really feel very accomplished for making this. Some things to consider: your fabric choice and your thread choice, your lining choice, those things all matter. But it's a great opportunity for you to create something custom that you absolutely could not get in a store. Secondly, sourcing your own fabric, making your own clothes is a wonderfully ethical way of dressing up your wardrobe. Quite frankly, this project came out of the utility of the fact that I couldn't find anything for men in a natural fiber velvet online. I couldn't find it in the stores. There just wasn't anything there for us. I'm all for the androgynous, genderless fashion, but it's not there yet to where you have a lot of choices in regards to more broad-shouldered masculine body types. And I say that because in the size ranges that people buy into for their stores, women's clothing or feminine sized clothing sells better. Please make sure you understand, even when it says made in the USA, it may not be made with ethical business practices. This Burda coat is a very classic cut, and it ends mid-thigh. I want something longer. I want something that comes down to closer to the ankle, mid-calf. A couple of years ago, I purchased a coat, one of the outerwear coats from the Erdem and H&M collaboration. It was a wool checked coat. It was beautiful. It was heavy. It had a button-out vest inside made of faux Sherpa. It was long. It had a large vent in the back and the jacket was long. This is one of my least expensive coats that I've ever purchased. It's my favorite. It is my go-to. It is durable. It's nicely made. It's lined well. Now, it was not cheap at all to begin with. It was not inexpensive, but I do feel it is a staple for me, and it's unique enough to where people clock it, but it's not unique enough to feel trendy. It's time for me to understand that at my age, a little goes a long way in regards to fashion, and a classic cut coat in a cool fabric is enough. I don't need straps everywhere and embellishments to get the point across that I'm a boss bitch. I want to make this coat in order to inspire you and to help you possibly make this exact same coat, or to go out and find something and learn how to maybe alter your patterns, maybe change the recommended fabrics, maybe draft something completely on your own, but to make something for yourself and to get this confidence that you can start designing for your own wardrobe. Stop buying crap. Stop. If you wear your clothes once or twice, they're crap. Stop buying that. Let's talk about Burda. Burda directions come in 3 languages: Spanish, French, and English. Obviously, I read them in all 3 because I'm fluent in everything. They use very specific language in these instructions, and quite frankly, I became confused 2 or 3 times in this process and had to undo huge seams in the collar, which was visible, in the hem of the lining, in the facings of the coat. Some of the drawings that they use, and these are technical drawings made in a CAD program, probably Illustrator or AutoCAD, something of that nature, they're not explicit. They're general, and if you don't know the terminology, front, center back, shoulder seam, side seam, or you don't know the different vocabulary for different types of assets when sewing, certain types of buttonholes, cuffs, different types of hems, certain types of seams, you might have a problem with these patterns. Now, I asked my friend Martha Porter, who uses the handle Buried Diamond on Instagram, and she is an amazing seamstress and designer. And she told me that in her experience with Burda tends to have really bad directions, although the patterns are good. Now, this pattern is ranked 2 out of 3 on the difficulty range. I wouldn't start here. I wouldn't start with outerwear or any sort of tailoring for your first project. Start with a throw pillow. Make something super easy. You know, this is just a 4-cornered pillow made from IKEA, but this is so easy to make yourself. And you can also learn how to do things like buttons or to set a zipper on something this easy. Now, I have a couple of videos in my feed about how to make throw pillows in a very easy way. If you haven't sewn before, this coat project is not for you. You can watch this to get familiar with it, but I would suggest that you start with something a lot easier, like a pillow or, you know, something small along that nature. Burda recommends a cotton poplin, cotton fabrics, or microfiber. It's a weird choice of fabrics in one way because it is a coat. It's very lightweight, what they're suggesting. So when I first saw this and the photo of this beautiful guy on the front, the jacket has a lot of drape and it is extremely lightweight. This coat on this model is sewn perfectly. It looks so good on him. And if you notice the big collar and things like that, the way they have it styled, this jacket could easily go very like 70s porn stash. So we have to be careful about what fabrics we're using, what kind of way we're styling this out when we wear it. And I'm all for the 70s look, but you have to remember big houses like Gucci are doing it. So their tailoring is impeccable. You might get clocked when you wear something and you're out with like high fashion dressed people. I really have wanted a velvet coat for a very long time. So for me, the fabric came first in this project. I absolutely wanted a velvet coat and then sought out the pattern. I chose this pattern because it's classic, and in regards to ease, it has a lining, but it didn't have padding. It's got a 2-piece sleeve. It's got flat pockets. It has things that I really like in a jacket, but it also reminded me of coats that I already owned. One in particular is a Marc Jacobs coat that came with a matching suit that I got when I worked at Marc Jacobs over 10 years ago. This coat I get clocked in all the time for how beautiful it sits on my body. Now, mind you, when I received this coat in my clothing allowance 10 years ago, I was sample size. I am no longer sample size, but this coat still fits me beautifully, and part of that is that from the armpit down to the hem of the coat, it flares. What you will see later with this coat that I made from Burda is that there's no flare. And I extended the length of this coat 12 inches, meaning there had to be some augmentation for movement. And I don't love how the coat looks buttoned, which is a bummer because I spent a lot of time on bound buttonholes and custom buttons and finishes in the front, which I thought would really make this sophisticated. And what it did was it really scared me when I put it on, because I look my age. I have a lot of things I need to accept in my life that I clearly have not been dealing with. And one of them is my age, and how when I look my age, I'm not ready to look my age. So there was a bit of a moment of, do I hate this jacket or do I hate my life after I created it? But no, don't worry about it. I love the coat. Where I sourced my velvet was IKEA. Now this may sound weird. IKEA does not sell their velvet that I know of by the yard, but they do sell a line of curtains called Sanela. Sanela curtains are 100% cotton. They're 55 inches wide. They are 8 foot 3 inches and then 10 foot and a couple inches, sold in double panels. The 8 foot and 3 inch panels will run you, I believe, $59, and the longer 10 foot ones run you $80. But you do get 2 panels, and it's a lot of fabric to work with. I could not source a natural fiber velvet for anything less than $100 a panel. When you are sourcing fabric and you are on a budget, make sure you check your resale shops for bedding, your resale shops for curtains, your resale shops for tablecloths, and other things like that. Those fabrics are woven or knitted on specialized looms so that they get much larger dimensions. In fact, the quilt that I'm laying on right now, the backing on it is a black king size sheet that I bought at a store. It has no seams on the back and it looks great. It also feels great and it's extremely durable in the wash. I decided instead of going to bed tonight, I was gonna cut out some of my pattern pieces. So forgive me for being in my pajamas, which I usually wear most of the day anyways. But I'm watching UFO documentaries on Netflix, and so I've scared myself awake. And I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting these pattern pieces out. Patterns come with a diagram which shows you how to place the pieces out on fabric. And it does it by width of fabric. Please follow that very closely because that is the most economic way to cut your pattern pieces out. Now, if you recall, I've added 12 inches to the body pieces of my pattern and we'll be adding 3 or 4 inches to the sleeves. So I'm gonna have to mess around with the layout for me to cut those out. Please keep in mind when you see things that say on the fold to cut on the fold and things like that. With velvet, you need to be careful about how you iron it. You can crush the pile on it, the stick-up threads, which is called pile. And I like to also make sure when I'm doing these pattern pieces that I am pinning a lot. So you have to transfer the marks from the pattern onto the fabric, which it takes time, but it's relatively easy. But I do not like the fabric and the pattern to slip off of each other at all. So you will see that I pin the pattern down with lots and lots of pins. So I buy pins in bulk. Can I have that? Some problems that I had with this coat were the sleeves. Setting the 2-piece sleeve is something that requires using ease around the top, the cap of the sleeve, and for some reason, the left arm went in perfectly. The right arm, I don't know if because I tried it twice had warped the fabric, but I'm absolutely gonna have to take that to the tailor to get them to repair it because that did not work out for me. Mango. The pockets were really interesting to sew because there were so many layers. One thing that I realized with the weight of the fabric that's recommended for the jacket is that it's easier to sew. The lightweight fabrics are easier to sew, and when you get into places like in the pocket where you're inside the jacket and sewing through 4 or 5 layers of fabric, it's very difficult to do with outerwear weight fabrics. So for me, there were areas where I couldn't even get the presser foot into where I needed to sew. So I recommend in that specific circumstance where there's so much bulk, possibly using a zipper foot, which allows you to put the needle right up to where you need to sew with no obstruction by the foot itself. I ran into that in the buttonholes. I ran into that inside the pocket. And I think that's it as far as bulk. I loved making this jacket. With the organization of the steps to create the jacket, I felt like it was a substantial project right off the bat. You're sewing the body pieces together right away, then you're working on the collar, then you're working on the sleeve. You know, the idea is, you know, you feel like you've made something substantial and it keeps you inspired or motivated to proceed onward. It took a lot of time, it took a lot of concentration, and I will say that during this, I can't say the hours long, but I would say that I watched about 10 ContraPoints videos. We're talking easily 14, 15 hours. Another thing that I realized was the effect caffeine was having on me in these handicraft projects. And that's in regards to illustration, painting. I do watercolors on this channel, but also in sewing. I found it really difficult on mornings where I had my usual coffee to sit and to focus. And when I switched up to a meal replacement in green tea, which I get it, if you've been habitually drinking something else, it's weird tasting. It doesn't taste good. But I had the same amount of energy with the green tea, and I felt lighter in the stomach, and it was much easier for me to focus on my progress in the project. The 42 with the 5/8 inch seam allowance fits me perfectly. There's room for a light sweater. There is not room for a bulky sweater, and you can see that in the shoulders. Where it buttons, there is not a lot of space for any bulk underneath. Now that might be my fault because of quarantine and Domino's Pizza, but I've been running. I'll get this belly down and we'll be good. I am very pleased with how this coat turned out, and even though it's home sewn and looks a little bit home sewn to me, I can clock the tailoring in it. I'm gonna wear it out in public and I'm gonna feel good about it. I love the way it feels on my body, the slippery acetate inside of it. I love how the velvet feels when I brush up against it on the outside. It's very tactile and it's very comfy. The pile on the velvet actually adds warmth to the coat, so it's not as cold as I thought it would be. It has a lot more thermal properties than I had expected, which I could have just researched, but one thing to consider while sewing slippery fabrics like the acetate in the lining, the velvet could be somewhat slippery, is investing in a walking foot. Your sewing machine feeds the fabric from the bottom, and sometimes what happens is feeding the bottom fabric, if it's slippery, doesn't feed the fabric on top when you're sewing two pieces together. So a walking foot also adds feeders on the top to move both fabrics equally per stitch. It's expensive. I would definitely buy one used, but I almost think it's a necessity with sewing. I hope you guys found this helpful or enjoyable, or at least a little bit entertaining in regards to making something for yourself. I do love the jacket. I wish it flared out a little more so that it hung off of the body, but again, I didn't take any initial measurements, so I kind of knew that this thing wasn't going to be the best. I was surprised at how nice it turned out and how great it looks, so I will be wearing it. It's just a lot more formal than I thought. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you're really excited about this, and yeah, I think it looks pretty bomb. So have a good one. What is going on?